While the White House says many elements of a final peace deal between Russia and Ukraine have been agreed upon, critical details are still being worked out. So, how close is an end to the fighting in Europe? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
A high-stakes conversation between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin could mark a significant step toward ending the war in Ukraine. The two leaders recently spoke for 90 minutes, agreeing to begin immediate negotiations in the Middle East and to implement a ceasefire on energy infrastructure. President Trump described the call as very good and productive, stating that both President Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy are eager to see the conflict end. Here is President Trump discussing bilateral relations with Russia.
So stated that both sides want to get to an improved bilateral relationship, the United States and Russia.
That's true.
How can we trust that Vladimir Putin actually wants that, in that he's not also being influenced at the same time by his close friend, President Xi of China?
Well, look, we have our own discussions with President Xi of China, and he wants to get along also, and he's looking to get along, and we're looking to get along with him. And we will. We have a problem of trade where we have a very big imbalance with China. With Russia, we don't have that much trade, and they'd like to, and we'd like to also. They have some very valuable things for us, including very big forms of rare earth. They have a lot of earth. You know, they have a big chunk of real estate, the biggest in the world for a country by far. And on that, they have things that we could use, frankly, and that other people could use. I think that President Xi would like to get along, and I think Russia wants to get along with the United States. I also think we're a much different country than we were just a few months ago. We're a country that's now respected. We were not respected. We were being laughed at. We had incompetent leadership. This was a war, as an example, that would have never happened if I were president.
For more, I'm joined by Ira Chaliff, a political commentator, bipartisan leader in Congress, and author of How to Stop a Tyrant, The Power of Political Followers to Make or Break a Toxic Leader. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Veronica.
So first, let's begin with maybe your top line thoughts, either about the nearly 3-hour phone call or, of course, just listening to President Trump kind of, talking about dealing with both Russia and China.
Well, first of all, I would like to validate President Trump for wanting peace. Not every leader starts off with that intention. So that's a great baseline. My concern is the way he is going about it, that it may produce temporary peace, but unless it is structured correctly, it's just really postponing the conflict and the war. Why is that? Well, as you know, my work deals with tyrannical leaders. And tyrannical leaders have a trajectory. They start off perhaps as being good Democrats, which Putin tried to do, but then very quickly his autocratic instincts took over. And when he was able to take advantage of certain terrorist attacks, he started to consolidate his power. He removed all the governors in Russia, replaced them with his own people. He got the Duma to vote for him. There's something like 2,900 members, and they vote 2,900 to 0, if you can believe it. And what happens is that his own brand, his own political position requires that he continues to look strong and to act strong. That's meeting President Trump's similar desire to look strong and act strong. So neither one can walk away from the table losing face. So at the last meeting, they wound up with a very, very weak, unclear agreement for a 30-day ceasefire of some sort. The problem is that may just be delaying the whole conflict, and not in a way that will actually bring an end to it with any sort of peace through justice.
Do you think that there is any significance in Russia's agreement to temporarily halt those strikes against energy infrastructures?
Look, I'm all for halting strikes that kill people anywhere, anytime. No one, can argue against that. However, it could easily be a ploy by Putin. The winter is coming to an end. Energy is less of a critical factor in the war. He can afford to give that little bit. But it isn't really strategically significant at this point. And the problem is that in my book, I talk about the danger of a strong political leader consolidating their power beyond which they need to govern. And that's, of course, what Putin has done in spades. Now he's trying to do that across the region that used to be controlled by the USSR. And unfortunately, what happens, history shows us, political theory shows us, no one who is on a path of aggrandizement ever stops because others give in a little bit here and a little bit there. He has to be stopped. Now, that's very problematic, but the alternative of not stopping him and letting him just walk all over Ukraine and get what he wants, partly now, partly later, will not serve our strategic interests or the people of Ukraine, and ultimately will not save lives.
How have U.S. allies in Europe and NATO responded to this latest development?
Yeah, I think, this may be one of the good things that President Trump's policies are intentionally or unintentionally producing. Europe has been too dependent for a long time on the United States. Now, to some degree, there are good reasons. It was in our national interest after World War II. We didn't want Europe to rearm, especially not Germany to rearm. And that served pretty well, 80 years without a major conflict until Putin took the step of invading and trying to annex Ukraine. So, yet at this point, it really is unfortunately necessary for Europe to step up and do this. So I think it won't happen overnight, but I think it's an important step in the right direction. What we want to do is make sure that that increased military power does not become an arms race that leads to the next war. It's very important that we remember that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was the third largest nation in terms of nuclear weapons. And it voluntarily gave up all its nuclear weapons in exchange for an agreement that the United States would protect its borders. We have a moral responsibility there. This isn't just, that it would be nice to do. When a great power gives its word, if it relinquishes its word, it's no longer viewed as a great power.
Do we know yet what the next steps might be in this negotiation process, and potentially how soon we could see a resolution to the war?
No, we really don't. So much of this is behind the scenes. And, on the one hand, we're getting the news statements. On the other hand, it's kind of a black hole on what's really happening. We know some of the pieces. We know what, each of the players ideally wants. But how there might be a path to get there is difficult. I don't think it's impossible. But I think it's very difficult. What I'm concerned about is that President Trump has put too much of his reputation on being able to end this war, figuratively, the first day of his administration. And in order to continue to look strong, he feels he has to see this war end. But he may do it at too great a price. And his reputation is important to him, his supporters, his political party. And I don't think he wants to go down in history as the Neville Chamberlain who gave away Czechoslovakia to Hitler, thinking that would stop Hitler's expansionist efforts, when all it did was feed them. And I think that my book is all about the followers around the leader in a political dynamic. And my belief is that those who are around President Trump, who want him to succeed, who want him to have a good legacy, need to talk to him in ways that he can understand that this is the way he's going about it right now is not likely to produce that outcome for him. And he needs to find a better way. He needs to find his own toughness with Putin, similarly to that which he had with Zelenskyy.
Ira Chaleff, we'll have to leave it there. Certainly a continuing story and one that we will closely be following. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, Veronica. Thank you.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.